All right, welcome everybody to our Tanya second section. So this is a section that is called the Shar Hayichud v'Ha'emuna, which means the gateway of unity and faith in God, which is an absolutely incredible, deep theological teaching of the Tanya of the Alter Rebbe. But just to bring us up to speed of what the plan is or how this is going to work. The Shar Yichud Ve'Emuna is 12 chapters long, so it's obviously very different than the previous section, which was 53 chapters. It took us many years to conclude. This one is shorter, but it's much deeper. The previous section, the 53 chapters of the first section, was more of a discipline of the heart, how we could control ourselves and serve Hashem with a love and with awe, and troubleshoot any issues that come up along the way. This one is more getting into the depths of the universe. Why did God create the world? How do we know God created the world? So it's obviously a very deep teaching. It's more theological. And really, it's so crucial in the bigger picture of making that combination of the first 53 chapters, which is all about the heart, to the next 12 chapters, second section, which is in the mind. So, in order to do that, we're going to start with a little bit of an introduction. This is an introduction from the Alter Rebbe himself. And the way we could look at it is almost like a bridge between the two sections, between the first 53 chapters, which was section one, and the 12 chapters, which is section two. Interesting to note, the Tanya now, the way we have it, it is actually five sections. There's five sections in the Tanya the way we know it now. But originally, the Alter Rebbe, when he published this book in the late 1790s, it was just two sections. The section that we just concluded, called the Sefer Shel Beinanim, the book of the in-betweeners, and the second section, which we're about to start, which is called Shar Yichud V'Emuna, the gateway of unity and faith. It was only after the Alter Rebbe passed away that his children, one of them being the next Rebbe, Rebbe Dover, they collected the rest of the Alter Rebbe's essays and writings, and they published it as another three sections of the Tanya. Iger Tshuva, which is a famous one, and two other ones. Letters that the Alter Rebbe was sending to other people, etc. But the first two sections are ones that the Alter Rebbe himself chose to put in a book. Interesting to note that the Alter Rebbe originally thought of putting the second section that we're about to start, to putting that first. The first section is all about the discipline of the heart. The second section is about the existence of God in the world, and it's more on the mind, meaning the proving of God in the world and our connection with God. And really, that's why the Alter Rebbe thought of putting it first, because you have to know the mechanics of how things work before the discipline and before the practice. So while the first section is the practical Tanya of how to make it relevant in my heart, it would make more sense to start with this section first, where it talks about the mind that will then inspire the heart, inspire the action. But the Alter Rebbe still chose to put the first one first, and it would make sense because the Alter Rebbe wanted to start with the practical guide. So even though this section is about the mind and it would make sense to go first, but the Alter Rebbe first wanted to introduce to us the practical part of it, the action part, and only then give us the behind the scenes of the mechanics of the universe, which is what we're about to study. So this is a very different style of a text than the first section. It's more in the mind, it's more theological. And just to give us a little bit of a background before we read it inside, I am hoping today we're going to start with the introduction that the Alter Rebbe himself wrote. And we're probably going to spend 2 weeks on the introduction, this week and next week. But just to give you a little bit of a background, we're going to start like this. The Alter Rebbe, who's the author of our Tanya, his name was Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. He was obviously an incredible person. He wrote Shulchan Aruch. He wrote the Code of Jewish Law. That till today in yeshivas around the world, it's called Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Jewish law by the Rav, by the Alter Rebbe, and this is worldwide studied, and it's the go-to Jewish law. Besides for that, the Alter Rebbe also wrote a siddur. The siddur that we use is compiled and authored by the Alter Rebbe, which means he took 60 versions of prayer and he combined it into be one version. It's not any longer. It's just he put it all together into one, which is an incredible feat. It's an incredible job. But with all that, I would say the most important writing or the most important teachings of the Alter Rebbe is the Tanya, because through the Tanya he created what we know now as personal Judaism. We know that when Hashem gave the world, when Hashem gave the Torah to the world at Sinai to the Jewish people, the way it worked was the first two commandments were spoke or direct or commanded directly from Hashem. God Himself gave the first two commandments, and then the Jews said, "We can't handle it anymore. It's too overwhelming of an experience for us." And so the last eight commandments and really the rest of the Torah was then given over by Moshe. So Moshe was the conduit to reveal the words of God to the Jewish people and to the world. So Moshe was our leader, he was our mentor, he was our guide, he inspired us in the ways of the Torah. Over and over again, you see in the Torah, if you look in this week's Torah portion, we're definitely looking forward to Nancy's teachings on it. It's all about Moshe. It's actually in this week's Torah portion. He says the Jewish people were complaining to him, and he says, I can't handle them all on my own. It's some incredible teachings that go on in this week's Torah portion, but it's all about Moshe leading the Jewish people through thick and thin. After Moshe died, the role model became Joshua, Yeshua, as he took the Jewish people into the land of Israel, where Lynn just got back yesterday morning from a beautiful trip to Israel. That's always the way it was in Jewish history. There was a leader, whether it was King David or whether it was Solomon. There was always that leader, and then it was the prophets. There was always those inspiring leaders that we would look to as our role model and as our source of inspiration. So the way, and this actually continued with the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the Hasidic movement, born in 1698 and passed in 1760. It was that same idea that the Baal Shem Tov would travel to far-flung places around the world, and he would inspire people and uplift them and empower them. But most of it was actually just them acting as an inspiration. So that was like what we would call in Hebrew a tzaddik. A tzaddik was like this ball of energy that you would be around them and you would feel empowered, you would feel uplifted. And as long as you were around them or you had that inspiration from them, you could do incredible things. You feel so on fire. And for that reason, often there was Hasidim who would travel to their Rebbes and they would come to their Rebbe. It was the most common around the holidays. It was like almost like the modern day pilgrimage. Or in the olden days, temple times, the pilgrimage was obviously to the temple in Jerusalem. But ever since the temple was destroyed, people would travel to their spiritual role model, to their Rebbe and their tzaddik, and they would gain inspiration. So it's almost like as long as you are connected to the source, which is that high voltage energy, you would feel that electricity run through your body as well. And that's the way it was for many, many, many years. But the Alter Rebbe, when he came along in the late 1700s, he said that the role of a Rebbe is no longer just to inspire, but it's more to inspire us to act, to bring us to a place of action, which means the Rebbe, he said, I'm going to give you ideas, but the ideas need to bring it into your own heart, into your own mind to educate you and for you to be able to teach others. Yes, Lynn, you had a question?
So before that, they just came, got inspired, and left, and didn't act. But then the Alter Rebbe said, "No, I want you to be the conduit to move this energy and action into your world and your community." Is that how I'm understanding it?
So I guess maybe I'll have to reword that because, of course, Jews throughout millennia were acting. They were definitely doing Judaism, but there was always that reliance on a spiritual figure like Moshe. Like what happened when Moshe, just a very basic example, when the Jews in the desert thought that Moshe died, when he went up the mountain and didn't come back down, they panicked and they said, "Oh my gosh, if we don't have a leader, we're doomed. We have no hope." And that's when they created the golden calf. And you find many, many times throughout history that same concept where they looked, and especially from the time of the Baal Shem Tov and from the expansion of Hasidus, where we looked at a Rebbe as our source of inspiration. Meaning, just to give you a story, there was a lot of Hasidim, um, 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 a lot of schools of Hasidus from the time of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had 60 prime giants of students. And then when the Baal Shem Tov died, they followed his successor, who was the Maggid, the preacher of Mezrich in Ukraine, and he had 120. He had double um, uh, the following of his Rebbe. And each one of those became their own Rebbe in their own right, in their own area. So there was once a chassid who was from the Alter Rebbe, and he complained that next to him in synagogue there's another chassid who was from a different Rebbe, meaning he represented a different sect of Chassidus. And I look at him daven, I look at him pray, and he is on fire. There's sparks flying during his prayer, like he's lifted up to a whole new world, and I'm not there. Why? I want to be on that level. And his Rebbe responded that when you see him daven, it's not even him davening; it's his Rebbe davening. Meaning all that's happening inside his mind, in his heart, is the inspiration he has from his Rebbe, and that rubs him enough that gets him on fire. But the goal that the Alter Rebbe wanted to institute was that we're not reliant on another figure anymore. It's to make it personal, to make Judaism yours, and to own it. So of course we need to get inspired from a Rebbe, but the goal is not to rely on that. The goal is to then be able to act on it on your own. So
So is that
Hasidim,
more the situation today with there's no one after Rebbe Menachem Schneerson? So it was really a pre-teaching to prepare us for
absolutely, and in
where
fact,
it.
yeah, in fact, I watched the videos, on YouTube. You can watch these things now of interviews from 1994, which is when the Rebbe passed away in June of 1994 on the 3rd of Tammuz, and you see um, uh, reporters basically saying that this is the end of Chabad because they had a Rebbe and now the Rebbe passed and their whole school of thought, their whole Hasidus is going to fold. And what they didn't realize is we were primed for exactly this, that the Rebbe teaches us, but it's in order to allow us to have ownership over it. So first of all, we still have the Rebbe's teachings and guidance through his books, and we still go to the Rebbe's Ohel, the Rebbe's resting place. But the goal that the Rebbe had the entire time was to lift us up to the place that we own our Judaism. We make it personal. We make it ours. So, and just one more idea. The We would still go to the Rebbe for the holidays, like that pilgrimage that I said. But the Rebbe, what he wanted to teach us there, he taught us ideas, and our job was to take those ideas and integrate it in our own life on our own. So the Rebbe wasn't spoon feeding us anymore. The goal that the Alter Rebbe has was he's going to teach us, he's going to inspire us, but it's our job to integrate it and to make it ours. Yes, Shira.
I was just going to say, so he was actually the real lamplighter when he passed the torch to other Hasidim to be lamplighters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, which is such a famous teaching.
Yes.
That Chassid is a lamplighter. Exactly. Very, very, very well said. So, just to get back to my idea here, that yeah, um, so until then, the human mind, until the Alter Rebbe, until this and the teachings of the Alter Rebbe came to be, and especially in the second section of Tanya, the human mind was not used so much as a vehicle to inspire Judaism. Of course, we need to use our mind to understand Torah and to study Talmud, but that was besides the point. So we need to use our mind to understand Torah, but for the most part, we relied on our faith of God in order to inspire us. The mind, the intellect, was actually more, instead of it being a vehicle, it was seen more as an obstruction in our Judaism because the mind is analytical and the mind could be cold. It could even be apathetic. And that's not what we want from Judaism. So for many, many years, the mind, while of course it needed to be used in order to study, it wasn't our catalyst of how we connect with God. We connect with God through our heart. We connect with God through our faith and the inspiration that we receive from a tzaddik. But the mind was more of a danger, more of a hindrance. And the Alter Rebbe comes along and tells us that the mind can be the key to the soul. We can't continue, the Alter Rebbe was saying, with the model that we are totally reliant on another for inspiration. We need to individualize Judaism. We need to take ownership of Judaism. And that's what the Alter Rebbe and really followed, like she was saying, by all the Rebbes, was to bring this idea amongst our circles, amongst Chabad, that he teaches us ideas and we integrate those ideas. So it starts with the Chabad, the Chachma Bina and Das, which is the mind of the soul, and we need to integrate it into our feelings. And that's really the Tanya between the first section and the second section. The second section is more about the mind, which is where we're about to study the theology of the universe. The God, where is God in the universe, and how am I the proof of God in the universe? And the first section is more the discipline of the heart. And go back to that story of the chassid and the prayer where he didn't feel that fire like another chassid felt, because not necessarily is this way of study so glamorous. It's not so much on the inspiration. For those, I don't know if Lynn at the Kotel, if you're able to see, you could see other people praying, like other circles of Hasidim. When they pray, there's a lot of fervor, a lot of heart. One of the most famous, they're known as Breslov Hasidim. The Breslov Hasidim, they began from the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov himself, whose name was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, a place in Ukraine. And he's actually buried in Uman, which is another place. It's in Ukraine as well. And there's probably 100,000 Jews that make a pilgrimage to his tomb for Rosh Hashanah, where they spend Rosh Hashanah in Uman. It's a very, very famous thing. Even non-religious people, they go there for the experience, and a lot of them are inspired from going, and they transform their entire life around. And it's very, very inspiring. But if you see them in prayer, the ecstasy that you feel in them is incredible. You see in them just this rapture and this excitement. Sometimes they yell in the middle of prayer, they run, they jump a lot. If Naomi, do you know what I'm talking about in the breast of Hasidim?
Yeah.
They're very they're on a high um uh, from many things, right, Steve? Steve, did I get that right? Are they on a high? The breast of Hasidim? Right. Yeah. So
What about their wives? Are the wives also like, have you met any of their wives or you've never seen them?
it's a good question, Michelle. We should bring one of them to. We should interview a couple, a breastless couple.
Well,
I think they're also very inspired. So I think it's a joint a team effort.
My mom's side worked from Brazil.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
No way.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Top of
well,
Wow.
well, even though you weren't actually looking at the women at the hotel, we were dancing and singing it. So yeah,
Awesome.
you weren't
Very good.
you weren't the only ones over there on the men's
Yeah.
side who were
Awesome.
inspired.
Perfect. Good. Okay. Interesting to note that the Baal Shem Tov, we know that the Baal Shem Tov, who was born in, let me put it this way, the Alter Rebbe, let's start with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was born in 1745. He was born through a blessing of the Baal Shem Tov, which means the Alter Rebbe's parents didn't have children for many years. And they went to the Baal Shem Tov, who was their Rebbe, and the Baal Shem Tov blessed them. So even though they lived in faraway towns from each other, and there was no telegrams back then or anything else. The day that the Alter Rebbe was born in 1745, the Baal Shem Tov treated it as a holiday. It was actually the same birthday that he had. The 18th of Elul was they shared a birthday, and that the Baal Shem Tov understood, and his students that today a new soul was born, a new soul entered our world, which is an incredibly rare idea. For a new soul to come into the world was incredibly rare. All of our souls are reincarnated or recycled, we would say. But the Alter Rebbe, his soul was a new soul. The Baal Shem Tov felt it, and he considered that day to be like a holiday. He himself prayed by the as the Chazan that day, which was rare, and he used melodies from the holiday, and it was a day that was incredibly celebrated. 3 years later, so this is 1748, the the parents of the Alter Rebbe, the parents of Reb Shneir Zalman, wanted to bring their child to the Baal Shem Tov so he could be the first to cut his hair. So we know that we have what's called an upsharon, or in Hebrew it's called a halakah, which is the first time we cut a Jewish baby boy's hair is at the age of 3. And they wanted the Baal Shem Tov to be the first to cut his hair. But the Baal Shem Tov didn't want to. And he said, the only condition that I would allow for him to come here is that the little boy doesn't see me. How do you cut your hair without seeing him? So they brought him in. They traveled the far distance, hundreds of kilometers in Russia, and they brought him to the Baal Shem Tov's court, and they brought him in backwards, so that the little boy wouldn't even see the Baal Shem Tov. He cut his hair, and then they left. They traveled the entire distance back. And the boy asked, "Who was that? Like, why can't I see him?" And they said, "That's your Zeta. That's your grandfather." Obviously, he wasn't his biological grandfather; it was his spiritual grandfather. Years later, the Baal Shem Tov taught his disciple, the Maggid, who later became the Rebbe, that there's going to be a student that's going to come to you that will change the world. And he couldn't meet me because otherwise he wouldn't be totally a chassid of yours, which is a fascinating idea. So he's going to come to you. You have to let him come on his own. You can't inspire him to come. He has to come on his own will. And only once he comes can you explain to him the purpose of his life. And that's exactly what happened. The Baal Shem Tov passed away. His disciple, the Maggid, his name was Rabbi Dov Ber, took over. And after a decade or so, the Alter Rebbe came to study by him. And he actually wasn't even that impressed with what was going on in the court of Mezrich, which is where the Maggid lived. He planned to leave, but he came back. He forgot something. He came back. And that's when he was incredibly impressed with the study that he saw and with the wisdom that he witnessed. And that's when he decided to stay. And only then his teacher, the Maggid, came to him and says, "Now that you're committed to stay, I could tell you what I know from my teacher. The Baal Shem Tov said that you were going to come. And you had to come on your own will. I couldn't inspire you to come. But now that you're here, I could tell you the purpose of your being here." I just want to tell you the words. He said that your mandate is to make Judaism personal to people, to bring Judaism to the world, and not to rely on others, which is an incredible idea. And that's exactly how the Alter Rebbe introduced this to the world through the 2 parts of the Tanya. So the second part, which we're about to study, yeah.
Could you say that again? Make Judaism personal. And what was the second thing you said?
And not to rely on other people to teach Judaism in a way that you're not relying on other people to receive it, that you're making it yours. So now the second section, which we're about to study, called the Sha'ar Yichud V'Emunah, which is the gateway of unity and faith. It's going to examine the very fabric of reality. And it's basically, instead of it being inspiration, it's actually much more thought-based. It's more the ideas behind the inspiration. It's 12 chapters long, will explore the universe, what is God, and what is the connection between us and God. But the Alter Rebbe starts the second section with an introduction. So this is the author's introduction, which we're going to touch on now. And just to give you a little bit of the background, like I mentioned before, the first section and second section are very different. The first section being a discipline of the heart, the second section being more theological and about the fabric of reality and the universe. So the Alter Rebbe introduces an introduction that really, I think, bridges between the two sections. Okay, let's learn it inside, and then I'll give you a little bit of the background. But I'm going to pull it up on my screen. For those that have the book, and I see Shira and Thomas have it, it's you can find it on Amazon. And if I sent an
And what,
email with the link
okay,
a few weeks ago, but I'm happy to resend it, or I could
thank you.
text it to you
Thank
if you
you.
prefer. It's a very
Thank you.
slim book. It's because again, it's only 12 chapters, instead of it being the 53 chapters. Sure. I forgot mine at home, so that's perfect. This is what it's going to look like, if you could see. So it's much slimmer. Um, and it is cheaper than the other one, but not, I thought it would have been cheaper if it's so much slimmer, but um, I guess it's going to a good cause. Okay, so let's start it inside, and it's a beautiful, it's short. I think we'll probably finish it next week, between this week and next week, but let's see how it goes. This is the author's introduction to the second book, section one, which is two types of love. The first book of Tanya, which was Sefer Shal Beinanim, guided us how to achieve an emotional connection to God by generating feelings of love and reverence. This second book, which is Shar HaYichud Ve'emunah, aims to enrich our intellectual understanding of God's existence and his relationship with the world. So really, this 5-line paragraph I just explained in the past half an hour, at length, the difference between the first and second book. In this introductory discourse, the author will explain how intellectual understanding and emotional connection are related, and how one acts as the foundation for the other. So that's really why I'm saying that this is like the bridge between the first and second section, because it's explaining how the heart and the intellect are actually related, and the intellect being a foundation for the emotions. So this is a verse from Proverbs that Solomon says as follows: educate a lad in his own way. When he grows old, he will still not swerve from it. So before we even continue inside, just reading that line, just the first few words of that, it doesn't seem to jibe well. Educate a lad in his own way. You would think there's only one way to educate. What does it mean? There's a way of education that is correct, and there's a way that's incorrect. What does it mean, educate a lad in his own way? That's going to be something that the Alter Rebbe is going to bring up. Educating a young person is in his own way implies that it is not a mature path, but one suitable for a child, right? Educate a lad, it's a child in his own way. So this is a way of a child education. Now, since the verse states, educate a lad in his own way, it implies that this is not the mature way of absolute truth, but an imperfect path tailored to the limited capabilities of a lad. So you have a better path or a mature path, but then for a child, you should have his own way of education, which is more based on the limited capabilities. And if this is the case, what is the virtue that when he grows old, he will still not swerve from it? So if it's only a childish way and a mature way of education that's on a limited capacity for the child, why would the verse continue that he won't swerve from it in his old years when he grows old? Why would we hope that the child, on reaching adulthood or adulthood, will still cling to the immature approach to his youth? So that's just a question in order to introduce a new idea that the Alter Rebbe wants to teach us. So again, the question is from a verse of Proverbs that says, "Educate a child, a lad in his own way," which makes it seem that it's not the way, it's his own way. It's based on the child capacity. But then the verse continues that he won't swerve from it in his old years. I thought it's not the ultimate path. So that's going to be what we're going to try to address. However, this thing is known that the two roots and foundations of worshiping God are reverence and love, right? That we learned at length in the previous section. We have love of God and we have reverence of God. In Hebrew, it's called Ava V'yira. In Aramaic, it's called Dechilu Urechimu. Reverence is the root foundation, which motivates a person not to transgress any prohibitions, to turn away from evil. And love motivates the observance of positive commandments to do good, namely the observance of all positive commands, both biblical and rabbinic, as will be explained later in the appropriate place. So we're going to learn that in the author. The author uses the future tense here, will be explained, even though the explanation has appeared previously in part 1. This simply may be a printing error, but it could also be understood in light of an internal Chabad tradition that the author initially intended to make this volume part 1 and the Tanya and later of the Tanya and later changed his mind. So this is a notes, basically it's the Rebbe's notes on the Tanya. What's interesting is let's just explain this idea in short. We learned already in the previous section, in section 1 of Tanya, that we have love and reverence for God. The reverence, it motivates a person not to transgress prohibitions, and the love motivates us to fulfill the positive commandments. So those are the two. They spearhead all of our actions, both positive and negative. But the Alter Rebbe references it as we will explain later. Really, we already explained it. But this intro, so the Rebbe just points out that you could see from this reference that the Alter Rebbe planned on making the second section first and the first section second. I don't know if that's so clear. But we already learned that in chapter 41 of the previous section, but the Alter Rebbe says we will learn it. It's because it's something that the Alter Rebbe planned on only teaching later. And the commandment to educate a child in the observance of these commands applies also to positive commands, as stated in the code of Jewish law. While the verse, educate a lad, speaks of a child under the age of bar or bas mitzvah, who is not obligated to observe the commandments, there is nevertheless a requirement for the parents to educate a child in observance. This, the Tanya notes, includes a requirement to educate the child to observe positive commands. If this is the case, then we must obviously educate the child to love God, which is the root and foundation of this observance. The child, though, will not have the same maturity of love as an adult, and his or her education will be a basic training in worship. This point will prove significant later on in the author's introduction. So I guess we'll get back to that in a little bit, but we're going to start with a beautiful verse from the Varim from Deuteronomy. And Alter Rebbe is going to, yeah.
Rabbi, this was a thought, this verse I've struggled with for many, many years. And one thing that's helped me is the way he should go is I have 4 children, you have 6. And I realized they're all different. And I can still teach each one the love of God, but it wasn't in my way. It had to be in their way. And when I could understand who, to a certain extent, not 100% of who they are, then once they had that understanding for themselves, then this is a promise I still take because there's 2 that have not departed. One's on its way, but one is still, I pray, this is a promise that I've tried to train the child in their way, and I am praying for that child as a parental mandate. I can pray for that child to return to God, but it's their way, not necessarily my way. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. That is the common way of understanding. Like the first thing when it comes to Torah education, a good educator of Torah is not someone that is able to teach wisdom. It's someone that understands the child's way and understanding that each child has their own path that they take in Torah. And that's an incredible thing. The goal is, and hopefully this intro you'll see, especially at the second part of this introduction, we'll get back to this idea of why does it say a child? If that's the ideal, it should be even when they're old, right? So the answer, Lynn, is absolutely that there's no one way of teaching. And the first key of an educator is to know that every child is different, and you're not trying to put them on one path, you're trying to put them on their path. That's going to be an integral thing. And so much of Torah is based on that verse. But over here, you're going to see the Alter Rebbe. Yeah, go ahead.
Isn't that really when we talk about Aaron? Aaron is bringing people to Torah by understanding where they are at that specific time. And that's when Moses at first didn't understand what Aaron was saying. Moses was saying, I'm bringing the Torah to you. And Aaron was saying, but I'm bringing the people to Torah. And they have to be brought, as Lynn said, in their own way, at their own time, but it's still in Torah and Torah's way.
Yeah, that's we have such scholars on in the class today. In the Ethics of the Fathers in chapter 1, it says Aaron's way was mekarvan la Torah. He would bring them near to the Torah, and he would take them where they are. He would never water down the Torah. He would give them the full dose of Torah, but at the place that they're holding. Awesome. Yeah.
So we're not just educating children according to their way.
Ah.
We're relating to adults as well, which is, quite challenging to maybe, like, if they want to hear about Jewish concepts, doing it in a way that they can relate to, rather than thinking, what does this have to do with me?
Right. And I'm really hoping the second half of this introduction is going to get back to the idea of the child's education or the child's faith. And we're going to see there's a level that we have a mature place that we strive to be. But then there's also that immature place that each and every one of us, while it sounds like a negative, immature, but there's that childish education that we have or we need, that we're gonna get back to in this introduction. I think it's gonna be very relevant.
In popular psychology, that's the inner child. We all have an inner child.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, awesome. So let's see it inside. We're now going to be.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I don't want to distract you. So, like, what I've noticed is there seems to be a disproportionate number of nonprofits run by Jewish people, most of whom are non-religious, but nonetheless, I sort of feel that by them, dedicating their lives to making the world a better place, even if they're not, going to synagogue or, observing the holidays, them dedicating their lives to make the world a better place is showing that they are Jewish, or that they feel Jewish inside.
Sure. Yeah, I like that. Very nice. I didn't know that there's a disproportionate amount, but that sounds good.
Well, okay, I said it from my own observation. I've never done a study. I just noticed that there's a lot.
Nice. Okay, so now we're going to be quoting a verse from Deuteronomy, from Moshe in the 5th book of the Torah, from Devarim, and we're going to be asking 2 questions on it that is going to be a springboard for the Alter Rebbe to introduce a phenomenal idea. Now, we're in the middle of the Kindle page, and Shira, what the page? Bottom of page 5 in the book. Awesome, cool. Now, concerning the command to love God, the verse states at the end of the Torah portion of Akef, so this is in Deuteronomy, where it says, which I command you to do it, to love God your God. So just a little bit, the verse in full would read, you shall guard all the commands that I've given you. And what is it, the commands that I've given you? To love your God. So the question the Alter Rebbe asks is a very simple one. Some clarification is needed. Why does the verse use a verb of action? I command you to do it, in reference to an emotion of the heart, to love God. It seems strange that the Torah describes loving God as something that we would do rather than feel. How would you do love? So you would think love is a feeling of the heart. It's not something you command to do. So why is it used as an action, as a verb? The Tanya will answer this question by drawing on a distinction we learned in part 1. That there are 2 types of love of God. One, unattainable, except to a select few, and the other, accessible to us all. The higher level of great love is the privilege of tzaddikim, exceptionally pious individuals. The lower level is something that we can all reach by disciplined meditation. As we shall see, it is the second love to which our verse in Deuteronomy refers, meaning the second love that we could all attain. Since it is a level accessible to us all, it is essentially doable. And that is why the Torah uses a term of action. I command you to do it, meaning to say, I command you to do what is necessary to achieve it. So meaning, since it's accessible to us, it's within our reach, God is not commanding us to love, God is commanding us to do what is necessary to attain and to achieve that love. So if that makes sense, the commandment is not on the love, the commandment is more on the doing the work that is necessary to attain and achieve that love. However, the explanation of the verse in Deuteronomy is as follows. So now we're going to see the answer. There are 2 types of love of God. One is the languishing of the soul, which is kolos hanefesh, for its creator, which is in the nature of the soul itself, and not something acquired through meditation. So that's like a gift of God that really is more for the tzaddik. The Tanya explains the first type of love in more detail. The first type of love is a product of the intellectual soul, overcoming the perception and allure of the physical senses, deflating and subduing the allure of the senses under its control. As a result, the soul will be ignited with fiery passion, a flame that rises by itself, and the soul will rejoice and be glad in God, its creator, and will delight in God with phenomenal pleasure. This type of love is not the result of meditating on God's greatness. Rather, once the physical allure of the senses is deflated and subdued, then instinctively the soul, by its very nature, will languish for God. Those who merit to reach this level of great love are called tzaddikim, as the verse implies that only tzaddikim are joyous with God, meaning they have that joy that comes as a natural instinct because they subdued all of their physical allure, and all that's left is that love for God, and therefore it brings them great joy. But not every person merits this love of the tzaddik, because it requires an extreme refinement of the physical senses, which block this love experience. So again, physical senses, that love that's so pure and so extreme by the tzaddik, for most of us is unattainable because we have physical senses that block that absolute pure love from coming forth. And B, a large amount of Torah and good deeds to draw lofty divine um, to draw lofty divine energy into consciousness, to merit to reach the higher consciousness of the neshama, which is above the lower levels of Ruach HaNefesh consciousness, as stated by Rabbi Eliyahu de Viras in Reishis Chachma, the Gate of Love. So chapter 3, he says that the higher love must come from the consciousness of Neshama. So over here, we're going to get into a little bit of details of the soul. In short, we know that the soul has 5 parts. The lower 3 are known as Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. The energy of the soul, the spirit of the soul, and the soul within the soul. The higher 2 are called Chaya and Yechida, and those are deeper and detailed in the essence of the soul. But what we're trying to say over here is that in order to attain this higher level of love, it has to come with lots of Torah study and good deeds, that you attain the higher part of the soul called Nektama, and that's really designated for the tzaddik. I guess he's going to explain it now in the translator's words. While our souls all possess the levels of nefesh, ruach, and neshama, the 3 levels do not always inform our consciousness directly. The tzaddik's consciousness has transcended the levels of ruach and nefesh, which are the lower 2, which are closely associated with the body, and is aligned with the level of neshama, which can experience God directly, without the mediation of the senses. He or she does this through overcoming the allure of the senses. I'm just going to turn the page here. So it's incredible, right? The tzaddik basically transcends past the level of ruach and nefesh, which are more related to the body. And how does it do that? Number 1, through overcoming the allure of the senses to have an essentially disembodied connection with the divine. And B, acquiring a large amount of Torah and good deeds to draw that consciousness back into his or her body. Clearly, this is something not attainable by most of us. We therefore must work towards the second type of love. So this is going to be one related to me and you, the second type of love, and that is as follows. And the second type of love of God is the love attainable by everyone. While our emotions are not under our control, the second type of love is attainable because it is the inevitable consequence of thinking certain thoughts which we can't control. So let's just pause here for a second. So we quoted a verse from Deuteronomy, but there's another verse also from Deuteronomy that is much more famous to me and you, and that is the Shema, right? Right after the verse of the Shema, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is taken from chapter 6, verse 4. The next verse says, "V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha," you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. So again, we have the same question. What does it mean you shall love God? And the answer, you can't command an emotion. You can't command the love. You can't command a person to love another person. It's a feeling that either is developed or is not. So the commandment, the beauty over here is the same idea, that the commandment is not to love. The commandment is to meditate on the Shema, on the verse of that connection that you have with God, that if you meditate on it correctly, or if you properly with the correct amount of time, you will develop a love. It's almost a promise from God
Oh,
that if you meditate on it, the love will come. So that is something that is attainable to me and you. And that's really the second type of love that we are referring to here. That it's a consequence, it's an inevitable consequence of thinking. If you have a certain thought, you will develop a feeling toward it. You will develop a love toward it. So that's the second type of love that is attainable to all of us.
So,
Now,
so
yeah,
Rabbi, in the Deuteronomy 11, in the Hebrew, it's weird because it says it's a collective mitzvah, but it's in the singular. And so, but it's two things to keep all the commandments, to love and to walk, but it looks at it as one. So if it was two commandments to love and to walk, it would have been mitzvot, but it's mitzvah. So they're connected and seen as one. The walk is a consequence of the love. It's not two, it looks like it's not two separate things, but
one.
one
Interesting.
commandment together. At least that's how I would
Yeah.
interpret it.
And the fact that it says mitzvah in the singular, you're saying that's referring to the love, right?
Well, it's the love and the walk together,
Or
because
the
then it
walk
says
together.
to love
Yeah,
and to walk. In my mind, I would have made it mitzvot, but that's
right.
not how it reads.
Let me just pull back over here that verse. Let's see it inside. To love your God. It's
Mitzvah.
interesting.
I know if
Over
he,
here, he doesn't even quote the second word, right? He says
right,
etc., meaning that's not, it seems like that part
right.
of walking is not even, part, obviously it's part of the verse, but it's not going to be part of the teaching here, right? Does that make sense? To love your God. And he stops before putting in the next verse, which is the next word, which is to
Right.
walk. Interesting.
So
Okay.
the
Great.
consequence is walking after the loving, but it's seen together as one mitzvah
Interesting.
from my
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But over here, he's saying more that the consequence of thinking is going to be that love that results from the meditation that we would have. Cool. Okay, so we're in the middle of the Kindle page over here, where it says like this: the second type of love will inevitably come when you will meditate well in the depths of your heart upon ideas which arouse the love for God in the heart of all Israel. The Tanya reminds us of two love meditations we have learned in part one, Sefer Shel Beinanim, the book of the in-betweener, one general in chapter 44, and another which was more detailed. So he's going to review it for us, two types of love. You could use either the general meditation we learned above in part one, chapter 44, how God is literally our life. And when you will contemplate how you love your soul and your life, then you will come to love God by contemplating and taking to heart that God is really your soul and your actual life. So if you love life, of course, we all cling to life. We all love our life. We may not like details of our life, but we love the fact that we're alive. We love the fact that we're here. So the beauty is if you reflect on the fact that God is the source of your life, you will come to love God. So that's one level of love that's more general. It's more seeing God or coming to love God through life. But in chapter 44, oh, I guess no, it's still part of the same love. And he's gonna quote it for us here. Let's see on the top of the next Kindle page. In chapter 44, the Tanya teaches this meditation as follows. Since you, God, are my soul and my true life, therefore I have desired you, meaning that I desire and crave for you like a person desires his own life and soul. And just as a person becomes aware of how much he loves his life when he is weak and exhausted, and he desires and craves that his energy should return, and similarly, when he goes to bed, he desires and yearns that his soul will be returned to him when he wakes up from his sleep. In the same way, I desire to draw inside me the blessed infinite light, the true source of life.
Beautiful.
As noted in chapter 44, the above meditation is based on the Zohar's commentary to the verse, my soul, I have desired you at night. The Zohar states that you should love the blessed Holy One with a true love of the soul, which is a complete love, a love of the nefesh and ruach, just as they, the nefesh and ruach, cling to the body and the body loves them. So must a person love the blessed Holy One and cling to him. The Tanya now reminds us of another detailed meditation from chapter 46 through 49. And I'll review this again just after finishing the two types of love. Or you could use the detailed meditation from chapters 46, 49, meditating upon and pondering in detail the greatness of the Blessed Holy One, the King and King of Kings, as much as your mind can handle, and also transcending your intellect by realizing its limitations. Let's just see how that flows 1 second. So meditating upon and pondering in detail the greatness of God as much as your mind can handle. Here we go. And also, oh, interesting. And also transcending your intellect by realizing its limitations. And then contemplating on the great and wondrous love God has shown for us historically. Despite his greatness, he lowered himself and came down to Egypt, the land's depravity, and to extract our souls from the iron smelting furnace, the Sitra Achra. May God protect us, to bring us close to him through the giving of the Torah, allowing us to attach ourselves literally to the Torah, every word being his name. We see that from the Rambam, and therefore attach ourselves to him since he is one with his name, which means that he has lifted us out from the most absolute depravity and impurity to his most absolute holiness and greatness, which has no end or limit. Then, through carrying out this meditation, the heart of any thinking person will be awakened with love of God, as in water, face reflects face. By dwelling on this detailed meditation in the depths of your heart, leading you to love God intensely and to connect with him with heart and soul, as will be explained at length in the appropriate place. Again, this is a reference to part 1, chapters 46 to 49. Okay, so let's just stop here. I just want to explain what we just to review a little bit. So what we know so far is that there's two types of love that we have that we can attain. Okay, so let's just pause here for a second. There's a type of love that is beyond most of our capability. It's a love that is really from the tzaddik. But then you have a love that is attainable to every one of us, and we could attain it in one of two thoughts. One is the love that comes through our life when we realize how much we cling to life, and when we're sick, we just want to be better again and function as normal human beings, meaning we want to be healthy, we want to be like regular humans, and when we go to sleep, we want our soul to come back in the next morning. So if we realize that the source of our life is actually coming from God, you would come to love God. The second one is allowing ourselves to transcend this world, which means realizing our limitations that we have and that God is the king of the universe, and allowing us to transcend beyond it, that God is beyond the world, and yet God took us out, right? The example we gave in the Tanya in chapter 46 was about the king that went to the forest to take a person who was all the way like a homeless person and brought him near and showed him love with an embrace. It will reciprocate a love back. So God did that to us when he took us out of Egypt, that we were like totally on the edge of our life, and God, and even though God transcends all of it, he took us out and he showed us incredible love, and that love is constantly being shown to us, so that will reciprocate a love back to us. So if you contemplate on this idea, it will bring you to a place of love. So this is the type of love that Moshe, the Jewish people, or especially over here, Moshe wanted to instill in us when he was talking about loving God. So I want to read a little further just to get the idea complete. We're on top of the Kindle page. Shira, what page are we in the book?
I'm not sure. Sorry.
Let me see if the second type of, it's like an underlined.
It's 10. We're just starting
Okay.
page 10.
Starting page 10.
9, sorry.
No problem. All right, here we go. And the second type of love achieved through meditation
Okay.
is required from us all. We would expect this method to be specified in the Torah. The Tanya now demonstrate that this is indeed the case. So again, now this love, we could see directly in the Torah, a commandment to have this second type of love. Now Moshe intended to plant in the heart of all Israel this second meditative path to love. In the passage beginning with the verse, and now Israel, what does your God, ask of you but to revere God and to love him? And ending with chapter 11, verse 22. The contents of Deuteronomy, both in chapter 10 and chapter 11, closely resemble the above meditation, as the Tanya now demonstrates. So again, the point over here, what we're trying to say is Moshe wanted the second type of love to be instilled in every one of us, and therefore he put it in the Torah, that it's something we could relate to. It's something we could, he implanted it in the Torah so that we could relate to it, that if we have this meditation, we will come to love God. All right, let's just try to finish with this paragraph. Moshe taught us the above meditation in the verses, look, the heavens and the heavens beyond the heavens, the earth and all that it is in it belong to God your God. God only desired your fathers to love them and chose their seed after them, chose you from all the peoples as on this day, and you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, nor shall you show a stiff neck anymore. With 70 persons did your fathers go down to Egypt, and now God your God has set you like the stars of the heavens for multitude, and you shall love God your God. So again, Moshe concludes with the words about this love with a term of action, which I command you to do it, because it is a love which is practically possible or doable to have in your heart by meditating with Bina, which is cognition, and das, which is recognition on ideas that awaken love, such as the general and detailed meditation above. So just to summarize this idea, the Alter Rebbe is quoting a verse from the Torah, a few verses from the Torah, that is basically referring or referencing love as something we shall do. And really, love you would think is a feeling. So we're quoting a few verses from chapter 10, from chapter 11, and on my own, I told you for the famous one from chapter 6, V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, that is all referencing a love that is attainable to us. It's attainable to us by one of two meditations that we learned in chapters 46 and 44 of the previous section of section 1, which is either a general love that we come to love God through our life, or more of a detailed love that we come to love God realizing that God transcends the world, and yet He took us out, and He's there to help us from Egypt and beyond, and that develops within us a love. So, if the point is that if we come to reflect on the relationship that God has shown us, it will come to as a reflection of a face to face in water, that it will come to develop within us a love for God. So that's so far what we know. We definitely have to expand on this point, which God willing we'll do next week, how that relates back to this a childish love or the love of the child and education of the child, which we're going to get back to. But just for you to already get the seeds of the point, where you're going to have the education of a child, which is not the full developed, but it's something that is within our capacity, that will be this level of love that me and you can attain. And therefore, Moshe tried to make it accessible to us by putting it as a commandment in the Torah. Yes, Naomi.
Thank you. So the passage that we read on the previous page on our screen
Yeah,
refers to the above meditation that we should
exactly.
do to foster love. What are the actual words that are I couldn't get it. Was it the passage about loving God? What
Verse, you're saying the verse of the Torah on it?
When they refer to the above meditation we should be doing. So if it's a meditation, I was thinking, does that mean there's specific words? Are we supposed to meditate on the Shema?
Yeah. So the meditation, and if you have do you have the first section over there? I don't have it in front of me, but over there it actually puts it in like a sidebar, like a practical note.
Oh, okay. I just ordered the book. I don't have it yet.
Oh, good. Okay, no problem. But in the first section, like the 53 chapters, they have like these sidebars that actually puts beautiful words in there. So I don't have the words in front of me, but it would be this meditation of realizing that we love life and God is a source of our life. So you come to, but I don't have the words in front of me. I mean, you could have the words of the Tanya here, but using that sidebar, I think would be helpful. Let me just
Yeah,
go
so
back
we're
here.
given other meditations in the Tanya, like the one
Here, Mrs. Bird, I think you're referring, Naomi, I think you're referring to this, right? Since God, you, God, are my soul and my true life, therefore I have desired you, that I
okay,
desire and
there it
crave
is.
for you like a person desires, right? This is like a quote from chapter 44.
Okay, so that's the actual meditation. Yeah,
I think so. Okay, cool.
yeah. Thank
All
you.
right, everybody, you're welcome.
Oh,
All right, everyone, have a great day. God willing, we'll continue next week. Same place, same time.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Jacoa.
Thank you
Bye,
so
everyone.
much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
All
Welcome back,
right,
Lynn.
bye.
See you.